Have you ever been in a situation where you're getting to know someone, things seem promising, and then the communication tapers off? Or maybe one of you goes away for a week and then you never hear from them again? It's an annoying part of dating, but it happens. And in this episode, I'm going to get into why momentum is so important in early dating and how to keep it going. Welcome back to Dating Intentionally. I'm Talia, I'm a dating coach, and I'm sharing no nonsense advice for navigating modern dating with confidence and ease, whether you've been on dozens of dates or you're just getting started. I believe dating can be fun. And today we're going to talk about the dreaded communication fizzle in early dating and how to avoid it. So, what is this fizzle? If you've been dating at all, I'm sure you have experienced this by now, and that is when things are going well, you're hitting it off, things seem promising, and then someone takes a vacation or has a tough week at work and they're just under it and they can't talk to you. Or someone gets sick, or maybe they have the kids or you have the kids and you just can't get it together to chat with them or meet them, or someone cancels a date and then never reschedules, whether it's you or them, right? This can happen on either side. Whatever it is, the schedules just aren't lining up. And then you're stuck because you can't see each other, and keeping up with texting is really hard when you've only been on one or two dates and you just can't nail down the next date, or no one's asking for the next date, and it's kind of a mess. And look, sometimes it is really no one's fault because scheduling can just be hard. Life happens, especially in the summer with travel and vacations and in the holiday season, right? When there's just a lot of holiday parties and like time off work and everything's weird. It just really, like, the momentum can drop and have nothing to do with you. And some people have a hard time admitting that they're too busy to date or that they aren't prioritizing dating, but they're dating anyway, and it's frustrating. You can't control that. When you meet someone and you hit it off, but you're having trouble with momentum, you need to be super clear on your flexibility, and you need to evaluate how flexible they're willing to be based on their actions and their words. Sometimes you'll meet someone and you'll be super into each other, but your schedules are just difficult and it might not be worth it. And sometimes it is. That's on you to feel out. Also, just because you're willing to get creative and work around your schedules doesn't automatically mean they are. Some people use a busy schedule to enable their avoidance. It's like a convenient excuse for avoiding intimacy and relationships. But some people are just too busy to date and won't admit it or don't want to admit it or don't see it. They'd probably be better off dating someone who is just as busy as them or has a similar schedule. Like, this just happens sometimes. That's why I say sometimes in my podcast that you need to see if your relationship has legs. Like, is there even space in your life or their life for a relationship? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes we are in a season of our life where, like, you just can't date, or you just can't date the way you want to date. And that is okay. In my dating journey, I absolutely knew the importance of momentum, and I figured this out pretty early on in my dating journey. And I remember matching with this guy who I wanted to meet, but he had a trip coming up and he was like, we were trying to arrange a date, and he was like, "Well, I'm available tomorrow." And I leave the next day. I'm available tomorrow at 6. And I already had a date that night that he was available. So I just scheduled him before the date. I pushed the other day a little bit. I made it work because I knew, and I told him this, if I don't see you before your trip, we're never going to meet. And he was like, "You're probably right." And that is the truth about momentum. If you match with someone on the apps and you can't get a date on the books within a week, consider them just gone. Like, because there is no reason for them to come back to you and set up a date because there are other people in their match pipeline. And I say this as someone who is literally engaged to someone who she talked to for 2 weeks on the apps because I was on vacation, but we made it work because we had a virtual date on the calendar at the very least, and we'll get into that. It's important, if you are trying to meet people off the apps, the best thing you can do is use the apps when you know you can set up a date in the next week. Like, you have the availability and the flexibility in your schedule to go on a date. If you are using the apps right before you're about to leave on a 2-week trip to France, maybe not the best time to use the app in your local, where you live, and switch your app location to France. You know what I mean? Like, don't be trying to stall and set up dates for after your 2-week trip. Take a break from the apps, hop back on a few days before you get home, then you can schedule a date. I hope that makes sense. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes you can't save it. Sometimes the fizzle happens and it just wasn't meant to be. My take is that if it's really hard to set up dates early on, like you just can't nail something down, that's not a good sign. It shouldn't take too much effort to find an hour or 2 to hang out, and I get that sometimes if you live far away from someone, it's more than an hour because you have to, like, drive there and get there, but still, if there's too much friction, it's probably better to keep your options open and keep talking to other people. I'm not saying you have to drop them completely, but if it's not happening, there's just only so much you can do, right? You can't force it. At this point, if your brain is like, "No, but Talia, they might be the one. I have to see them." Let me remind you, they are a stranger. You don't know them. You're making up stuff about them. You're projecting a fantasy onto them. You will be okay if this one doesn't work out, especially if you haven't met them in person yet, especially if you've only been on like 1 to 3 dates. It doesn't have to work out. It's okay. But let's talk about how to keep the momentum going and avoid the fizzle. We're going to focus on what you can do, but I want you to remember that it takes two, and there needs to be reciprocal effort for this to work. The interesting thing about effort in this context is that it might not always be one for one. Like maybe you initiate more text conversations, but they initiate more dates. See, I still call that reciprocal because you're still both contributing to the momentum of your early relationship, but you're just doing it in different ways. It doesn't always have to be tit for tat, one to one, equal on everything. So, why is momentum important? Well, you're starting from zero, right? Especially on the apps. If you're dating someone you've already been friends with, kind of, but like it's more important if you're just dating strangers, people you've never met or talked to before, or don't really know. You're starting from zero and you need to keep it going. Think about your existing friendships. We all started somewhere. You already built that momentum, they're already in your life. And why? Because you kept up the repetition of seeing each other frequently over a period of time until the friendship became established. And that's what we need to create in dating. It's not easy, but that's why I have to talk about it on this podcast. Every time you hang out with the person you're dating, it creates, hopefully, ideally, it will create more desire to hang out again and again and again, right? You are having a positive experience, so you want to repeat that positive experience because it feels good to be with them. That's the goal. And as you get more into a relationship, you spend more time together, not less. So there needs to be room for things to grow in that way. We lose momentum when we don't show interest, we don't try to get to know people more, when we don't talk to people we're dating or have time to see them, which is the most important. Momentum also matters on a larger scale in a relationship. Relationships can stagnate when people stop putting effort in and there's nothing to look forward to, like date night, or a goal you're both working towards, or a milestone like moving in together, or a trip that you have planned. So, I think I heard this quote on another podcast, and I think there is some truth to it. Relationships are like sharks, they have to keep moving. And they don't have to move fast, but they have to keep moving to work. But we're talking about momentum in early dating because this is where a lot of connections unfortunately die. We can't always control it, but as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast, I like to focus on what we can control. So let's get into some ways you can keep the momentum up in early dating, and this is in no particular order of importance. By the way, if you are a YouTube person, you can watch all of these episodes on YouTube. You can watch my episodes with guest interviews and everything. My YouTube channel is linked in the show notes. You can also Google Dating Intentionally YouTube and you will find me. You can also connect with me on Instagram, dating.intentionally. I love hearing from you. Definitely shoot me a message if you have a question about an episode or if there's a certain topic you want to hear. I would love to hear from you. All right, let's get into it. So, the first one is phone calls. All right, if you want to build momentum, call each other. Enough with the texting. Just pick up the phone and dial and call them. Phone calls are better than texting anyway. They're in real time, they can be more spontaneous, and they're special because no one really does it anymore. I will say my fiance Johnny called me the day after our first in-person date and I was just like, "Okay." Like I wasn't expecting him to call me at all, but he would just call me out of the blue and I went with it and it helped build momentum. It helped build a sense of familiarity even though we were strangers, right? Okay, like you're calling me and I'm just driving home from whatever I'm doing and we're just chatting for a couple minutes. It felt like he was a friend, and that really helped with the momentum. Another one is FaceTime. So, even better than a phone call is a FaceTime. You can actually see their face, right? Again, talking in real time, you can kind of be a part of each other's routine a little bit. Like they can see your place, you can see their place, scope out their their living situation a little bit. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be quick. Like it can just be like 5 minutes. Like, hey, I was just making dinner. Thought I'd give you a call and just try you. And just again, you're just shooting the shit. You're just talking. It doesn't have to be a big deal and it does help keep up the momentum. All right, another one is texting. Of course, texting can help build the momentum. Just remember it is low effort. Like texting is a pretty low effort action in early dating. It's so easy to do. You can do it while you're on the toilet, you can do it from your bed. It's like not really what we need to be paying attention to, but I of course it is important to text because it shows that you're thinking about each other between dates. It's how you can make plans. It's you can share memes, you can share photos of what you're doing. Like it does help with that familiarity, that friendship level stuff, like, just be like, "Okay, you're part of my life, I'm texting you." And I have one episode about texting, I think I have more than one, but I know I have one episode that's just, like, all about texting, and I'll link it in the show notes. And the best like rule of thumb for texting is just a daily check-in. Just a quick, hey, think like how's your day going? What are you up to? Show a photo of what you're making for dinner if that's your vibe. Send them a picture of your dog. Send them a picture of like a hike you went on. I think actually Johnny did send me pictures of hikes he went on like before we met. And he was like, I'm on this hike, and he would just like send me a random photo. You can do that. That is a way to build up momentum and integrate each other into your lives more. And again, you're not trying to do the deep getting to know you stuff over text. Save that for the in real time conversations, but you can still keep each other top of mind, you know? Obviously, dates, going on dates is a great way to build momentum. I would say the most important way to build momentum. You don't want to have too many dates in a week, like in the early stages. I think the best cadence, like if you don't have kids and if you have a pretty flexible schedule, the best cadence would be one date on the weekday and one on the weekend, right? So you can do like a dinner, drinks, happy hour, coffee on a weekday, and maybe a longer date on the weekend. Do that for a month, then you have 8 dates, right? So it's like that's really good momentum. Of course, life happens, you can't always do that, that's okay. Maybe some weeks you'll have 3 dates, maybe some weeks you'll have 1 date. Whatever can work in your schedule though. This is not like what you have to do. This is just a really solidly good cadence. Also remember that not every date, especially after the first few, has to be a date with a capital D. You can meet for breakfast, a workout, a walk, for coffee. It doesn't all have to be super like a fancy set up dinner. It can at a certain point, to build momentum, spontaneity is your friend. Like after the first 3 to 5 dates, you can be like, "Hey, I'm just gonna go to the beach. You wanna come?" Or, "Hey, I'm going on this hike. Do you wanna join me?" It doesn't have to be so planned out. Because again, if you're building a relationship, you're gonna build up the sense of familiarity, and you can do the spontaneous dates. It's part of what makes it fun, and get that spark going, get that chemistry going. And as always, if you're long distance, if you have kids, if you just have this crazy schedule, if you work weird hours, focus on what you can do, not what you can't. Focus, get creative. Remember that you can use phone calls and FaceTimes to your advantage and focus on what you can do. If you can only swing one in person date a month, that's great, but you have to supplement with the FaceTimes. So, another part of momentum is making plans. Of course, you want to follow through on those plans, but making sure that you keep having a plan on the calendar. You don't need to end each date with a plan on the calendar, but I would say within like 2 to 3 days after each date, hopefully you are making a plan. Please don't wait for the other person to initiate the plan every time. Make sure that you are also stepping up and initiating the plan if you want to see them again, if you want to keep things going. If you're not interested, don't do that. Let's not also forget virtual dates. So, long distance daters, listen up. You can do virtual dates. You can do them on your phone or on your laptop or on your iPad, whatever it is, like a tablet. You can watch a movie together, right? You can be like, okay, so let me just show you an example. Even though Johnny and I were not long distance, we used to watch movies and TV together by loading it up on our TVs, like whatever show it was, and then calling each other and counting down till we hit play and then hanging up, and then we would text throughout the show. So we were synced up, watching at the same time and just texting. Of course, you can be FaceTiming during the show. You can play games together virtually, like video games, just other games online or on your phone. You can both order takeout and have dinner together virtually. There are so many different things you can do virtually to spend time and to have dates, especially if you're long distance or if you are on a trip or spending time with family out of state. Make it happen. You don't have to like wait for them to initiate something or wait for them to text you. If you are interested, show interest by setting up a virtual date. You also don't even have to call it a virtual date. If that is weird to you, you can just be like, "Hey, do you want to watch this show with me?" Or, "Hey, like, do you want to play?" Like, send them a link to a game and just be like, "Do you want to play this with me?" Right? So speaking of showing interest, that is another way to build momentum is to show interest. If you play it cool, if you try to be the cool girl, you're trying to be like detached, this is going to backfire, right? You want to be with someone who is happy you are interested in them and hopefully they're showing interest in you back and that's how it works. So you're part of this. So make sure that you are showing interest in various ways based on your comfortability, like physical touch or obviously with your words. You can communicate how much you're enjoying getting to know them. You can give them a small gift like their favorite snack. Make sure you listen to my podcast about love bombing versus showing genuine interest. I'll link that in the show notes because that will help you navigate like what level of interest to show at what time, because obviously you don't want to overdo it on the first, second, third date. But yes, show interest. That is part of the momentum because they're going to lose interest if they don't feel like you're into them, and you're going to lose interest if you don't feel like they're into you. So make sure you're doing your part if you want to get to know them more. Another important way to build momentum is by opening up gradually and slowly, right? So if you want to build a connection with someone and you can hang out with them, twice a week and do the phone calls and FaceTimes and texting, but you never go beyond surface level stuff like what you're doing and what you're eating and what your workout is, you're never going to build any connection. You've got to go deeper. You've got to share offer details about your life, offer your opinions, your thoughts, your feelings, things about your past. No, you don't have to trauma dump. You don't have to share every single little thing, but you've got to gradually offer up more and more. And I want to share an example with you for like a meet cute, right? So I met someone at the gym last week, a friend, and she was wearing an Ithaca shirt and I flagged her down. She was like wearing AirPods. I flagged her and she was like, "Oh, do you need this?" I'm like, "No, no, no. Did you go to Ithaca?" I went to Ithaca. We started chatting. And we're chatting for 5 minutes and we're just doing the small talk. What do you do? The surface level stuff, right? The stuff that's not going to make a connection. And then I decided to offer this information and say, I've had trouble making friends here. I am like trying to make friends here. That's a vulnerable thing for me to say. Throwing them out a little line, right? And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I totally get it. Like, I just moved here, blah, blah, blah." And we traded numbers and we decided we're going to go climbing. So it's like me sharing that information and opening up a little bit to this stranger was a way into a connection and now we can go hang out. Like that's what I mean by opening up. You've got to share and offer up some things, just something that someone can grab onto, right? And it's like, "Oh, me too," and relate to. The other side of this, of course, is going deeper and asking questions. So if you want to build momentum, you've got to learn more about them, deepen the relationship, ask the hard questions, ask the things you're curious about their past, about what they want for the future, about how they feel about certain things, what they think about certain things, their philosophies, all that stuff. Really important for momentum because, again, if you're just talking about surface level stuff, you're never going to actually get to know them. This is part of it. And by the way, if you are having trouble getting to know someone and you don't know what questions to ask, I want to point you in the direction of these card decks, the and card decks. I am partnering with them. There are so many decks. You can grab them in my show notes with a discount with the code Talia at checkout. Also, if you use the links below, the discount is automatically applied. But these are great questions. You can carry some in your bag with you on a date. This is actually the strangers deck that I'm using right now. Some questions are: what are your top 3 pet peeves? If you could choose 3 people to share an intimate meal with, who would they be and why? What do you consider your 3 greatest achievements thus far? How do you define success? Again, these are great questions. It's hard to think of these questions on your own sometimes. So check out these decks. They're linked below and you can get a discount. And finally, the last way to build momentum is by introducing them to friends. And I've said this many times in this podcast. You can introduce someone to your friends on like the second date if you want. It doesn't have to be a big deal. If there's something happening, like if there's already some kind of gathering or thing that's going on this in the week with your friends, just bring them along. Let's just say the event is starting at 6. Tell them to come at 8. You know what I mean? Like they don't have to stay the whole time. I used to bring guys climbing because I went climbing with my friends every single week we would go bouldering at the local gym and I'd be like, "Hey, do you want to come boulder with me and my friends?" And it was very casual, like super casual. They'd come, we'd boulder, we'd chat, and that would be the night. And it's not a big deal, but it's another way to build momentum. So just keep that in mind, keep it in your back pocket. Ultimately, I want you to figure out a cadence with momentum that works for you. Some people don't like or need or want daily contact, but it's important to figure out what you want and what you like and then be able to communicate that. Also, you don't have to even like say it all out loud. Like you can just do it. For example, if you feel like calling them, call them. My fiance, he didn't text me, "Can I call you?" He didn't tell me he liked phone calls. He would just call me and I would answer and we'd chat. So you don't always have to do that. You can be like, "Hey, what's your texting style?" You can absolutely do that. But sometimes you can just show up the way you want to show up and see how they respond to that as well. So why does the momentum die? I mean, sometimes the momentum dies because it's too much too soon, right? And I've talked a lot about going slow and dating and how to slow things down. But you've got to make sure that, again, if you start too hot and heavy at first, it really doesn't have anywhere to go. And then the momentum is just cut short because you've done it all already, right? Like if you're seeing each other every single day, or if you have sex like really early on, there's nowhere for the momentum to take you. So you want to use momentum to your advantage here in the dating process. That's why the slow burn is so effective because there's so much you still have to do together to get to know each other in a longer amount of time, which helps build trust. Whereas if you just hang out every day for a week, you're doing sleepovers in week one, it's not sustainable because there's no foundation. You just met, right? You're still strangers, even though you have spent every day together and you've had sleepovers and all that stuff. Can it still work? Yes, of course. There is exceptions to everything. It's just most of the time you need to get to know each other over a longer amount of time. And this is where momentum is really important. And look, the fact that momentum dies so much in early dating due to just scheduling conflicts is yet another reason to entertain multiple options and multiple matches, if especially if you're dating on the apps. Like, know that this happens. It can come out of nowhere, right? Someone could be like really consistent and then all of a sudden they're just like, or they go on a trip for 2 weeks and all of a sudden they're just over it and they don't want to talk to you anymore for whatever reason. That's why, again, before you're exclusive, keep talking to people on the apps. That way, if the momentum dies with one person, you've got another person to chat with, talk to, get to know. And just to recap, when it comes to momentum, always focus on what you can control, do your part, and if it fizzles out, let it go. And look, if something does fizzle out, like you just kind of the communication tapers off because someone travels or there's holidays or there's work, you can reach out again, right? You have nothing to lose. So if there is someone in the last 6 months that you've dated and things fizzled out with, by all means, check in with them. How's your summer going? Hey, I was just thinking about you the other day. How's it going? Can't believe we fell off. Would you want to meet up again? Shoot your shot. Go for it. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they're less busy now. Or maybe you are. Okay, so I want to get into the dating dilemma. So, if you want to submit your dating dilemma, you can in the show notes. There's a link there. It says dating dilemma submission. It's anonymous. And when you share your issues, it helps other daters feel less alone. So, thank you to everyone who submitted. I get a lot and I try to choose the ones that are relatable, but like also we haven't talked about yet. So, thank you. All right. So I, 28 female, have been dating my partner, 38 male, for 8 months. I found out around the 6 month mark that he isn't sure if he wants kids and doesn't really have a strong vision for what he wants in the future overall. I had asked earlier, but his answers were too vague to raise alarm. We have talked about it a few times since the 6 month mark, and he says he's working on thinking about what he wants, but is still unsure. And I feel like I'm bugging him. Everything else about our relationship is amazing. What should I do? I've been there. I mean, I got this. It's tough. You're 8 months in, so you're almost a year in. Things are going well. Clearly, you can communicate, and like you said, everything is amazing, but you're not sure where you align on this. It's funny, I had, like, a reaction to, "He's working on thinking about," like, oh my gosh. But you know what? Look, we have to respect that these decisions take time and our minds can change even if he says, "Oh, you know what? I want kids now," and maybe in, like, 3 years, his mind could change again, and that is something that we have to accept. I think, again, focus on what you want, focus on your timeline. So, if you were not dating anyone right now, what is your timeline? What do you want? Like, if you know you want children, you're 28, what are your ideal child birthing years? Like, I know we can't always control this, but if you could, what are the years you want to be having kids? When would you want to stop? How many years would you want to be married before you have kids if you want to get married? All that stuff. So figure that out for yourself because you can't base it all on him, especially if he's not sure. It might be helpful for him to know where you stand, right? So lay it all out for yourself. I would say maybe in like another month, bring it up again, especially be like, I've been thinking about this for me. You can't control how much effort he's putting into working on thinking about it. So all you can do is focus on yourself, communicate what you're thinking and go from there. And I want to touch on this because I've been dealing with this in my relationship too. We are like not always aligned on the kid thing and we're getting married. Like, and I think I've learned that it's okay to go into a marriage not knowing because you're going to figure it out together. You're going to eventually make that decision together based on the various factors of your lives together. So I know you guys aren't married and you're still early on in your relationship, but just know that you don't necessarily have to have it figured out completely. I think, especially if you're both on the fence or one person on the fence, as you get deeper into your relationship and closer to the engagement marriage mark, if you guys get there, then yeah, it's more important to talk about it more plainly. Like, okay, well, if we don't have it figured out by this age, or if we don't have it figured out by this part of our lives, like, what are we going to do? And the way to figure that out is you have to start with yourself. You have to figure it out for yourself first. Don't wait for him to put his cards down. Put your cards down first. And, for my fiance and I, it's like, I know the more I'm with him, the more I want kids. And he's still like, I don't know. And that's tough. The uncertainty sucks sometimes, but it's like, you know what? We don't have to figure it out right now. And I am confident that we will figure it out together. And that's kind of the attitude that I hope that you can have too. Like, it's okay if you don't have it figured out right now. You're 28, he's 30, you have time, you're not married. Keep getting to know each other. Keep seeing if this relationship is what you want for the long, long, long haul. And trust that you will be able to have the communication skills to figure it out. I hope this helps. All right, we are going to wrap up here. I want to thank you so much for listening. Thank you for trusting me. I hope I helped you get a clearer idea of what momentum is in early dating and why it's so important. And I really don't want you to forget that you are doing great. I'd love it if you share this episode with someone who is navigating dating and might need a little confidence boost or some tough love. If any of these episodes have helped you in your journey, you can help me by leaving a stunning review on Apple or giving Dating Intentionally 5 stars on Spotify. I'd really appreciate it. Once again, I'm Talia. This has been Dating Intentionally, and I'll see you on Friday.